You hit render on a Hailuo clip and it's done in a minute flat. Then you try the same thing on Kling and you're still waiting 3 minutes later, wondering if you picked the wrong tool. Hailuo is built for raw realism and speed. Kling is built for cinematic storytelling and longer clips. One of them is your default pick, and the data makes it pretty clear which one. Test 1, output quality. This is the one that stings the most when you get it wrong, because you spend credits, you wait for the render, and the clip comes back looking rough. Both Hailuo and Kling claim film-level quality, which is marketing speak for nothing, so I went to the actual leaderboard scores to see who's telling the truth. I looked at both the VBench text-to-video leaderboard and LM Arena's ELO ratings, and Hailuo comes out on top on both. VBench has it at 84.41 versus Kling's 83.13, and LM Arena's ELO puts Hailuo at 1168 against Kling's 1152. The margin is real but narrow, so both are genuinely top tier, but Hailuo is consistently the one sitting at number 1. Now, the gap between them is small, like 1.28 points on VBench and 16 ELO points, so it's not a blowout by any stretch. Small gaps at the top of a leaderboard are still gaps though, and Hailuo holds both positions consistently. If you're generating a lot of clips, that consistent edge compounds fast, and that's what actually matters here. I expected this to be closer, given how much Kling leans into its cinema-grade branding, but the leaderboard data says Hailuo takes output quality, sitting at number 1 on both VBench and LM Arena. That puts Hailuo up 1-0, and the quality lead is already on the board. I've spent enough time inside these tools to know that leaderboard gaps that look tiny on paper feel very real when you're burning through a credit budget. Drop a comment if you've hit that wall too. Test 2, generation speed. So here's the scenario that actually costs you. You're iterating on a short-form video, you need to try 5 different versions of the same clip, and each render takes 3 minutes. That's 15 minutes of dead time per round of edits, and speed decides how many good ideas you actually get to test before you run out of patience or budget. When I dug into community-reported times, Hailuo is turning out a 6-second clip in about 60 seconds, while Kling is taking 2 to 3 minutes for a 5-second clip, though Kling is rendering at 1080p versus Hailuo's 720p, so the setups aren't identical. Even with that caveat, Hailuo is roughly 2 to 3 times faster, and for rapid iteration, that gap is not something you can ignore. The resolution difference is a real asterisk here, because Kling is doing more work per frame at 1080p versus Hailuo's 720p, so a perfectly controlled test might close the gap a little. One of the biggest problems I run into when using AI agents is turning their output into YouTube content I can actually use to market my product. That's why this video is sponsored by Subscriber, a tool that helps business owners connect their AI agents to YouTube and market their products without spending 10 hours every week creating content. You can connect Claude or ChatGPT directly to Subscriber. It then analyzes your business, website, and YouTube channel to help you create SEO-optimized video ideas, scripts, thumbnails, and even complete videos that actually match your brand. What I like most is that every week, Subscriber gives me a list of high-potential video ideas I can immediately execute, and it can even help edit videos for me, with or without my face, including videos like the one you're watching right now. It's easy to get started, and you can try Subscriber for free using the link in the description below. Now back to the video. But community reports are directional, not cherry-picked, and the pattern is consistent. Hailuo finishes first, almost every time, which is the call I'm making. Hailuo takes generation speed, and I didn't expect the margin to be this wide, even accounting for the resolution difference. That's 2 for Hailuo, 0 for Kling, and Hailuo is now up on both dimensions that everyday creators actually feel. Test 3, pricing and credits. The number that matters here is 0.03 per second of video, because that's the gap between the two API prices, and at scale that adds up fast. A creator running 500 API calls a month is going to feel that difference in their bill, so I went through both official pricing pages to see exactly who's charging what. The free tiers break down like this: Hailuo at 100 credits per day versus Kling's 66, and on subscriptions, Hailuo gives you roughly 100 credits per dollar against Kling's 66, so Hailuo wins on both of those. But flip to the API, and Kling is at 0.12 per second versus Hailuo's 0.15, which is about 20% cheaper. And for heavy API users, that's the number that actually decides the bill. I was expecting Hailuo to sweep pricing given its better free tier and subscription value, but Kling's API rate is the decisive factor for power users, and that hands Kling this test. So it's Hailuo 2, Kling 1, and Kling is finally on the board. Okay, so the next two tests are where things get interesting for specific workflows. One of them is going to matter a lot if you need a character to stay consistent across multiple clips, because that's where creators get burned the hardest. And the other is about platform limits that could completely change which tool fits your actual workflow. Test 4, Style Control and Consistency. The failure mode here is brutal. You spend 20 minutes generating a character, you get a great looking result, then the next clip has a completely different face. That's not a creative choice, that's a broken workflow, and both Hailuo and Kling market subject reference features as the fix. But community reports tell a very different story about how well those features actually hold up. Watch what happens when you look at actual user reports on this one. Kling users are calling its character consistency marketing completely misleading, and that's a direct quote from the community. Hailuo's director's mode, on the other hand, is getting consistent praise for fine-grained control over motion and style, and the community consensus lands clearly in Hailuo's favor, even though this data is directional rather than a controlled benchmark. Hailuo takes style control and consistency, driven by community trust in director's mode and real user frustration with Kling's reference features not delivering what the marketing promises. That's 3 for Hailuo, 1 for Kling, and Hailuo is now in a commanding position. Test 5, Platform Limits. The objection I hear all the time is that 6 seconds is not enough to tell a story, and that's a real constraint. If your workflow depends on a single clip carrying a narrative beat, a 6-second ceiling forces you to stitch clips together in ways that break the flow. And clip length is one of those limits that sounds technical until it actually kills a project. Here's the breakdown. Kling tops out at 10 seconds per clip versus Hailuo's 6, which is nearly double. And for narrative work, that difference is decisive. Flip to API rate limits, and Hailuo runs at 10 requests per minute against Kling's 5, so Hailuo is twice as fast for automation pipelines. Both tools are on web, iOS, and API, so no platform advantage there. This one splits depending on what you're building. Kling wins on clip length, Hailuo wins on API throughput, and they're equal on platform reach. The reason Kling takes the test overall is that a 10-second clip is a hard limit you can't work around in post, while you can batch API calls to get around a rate limit. Clip length is the less forgiving constraint. Kling takes platform limits on the strength of its 10-second clip ceiling, which I didn't expect to be the decisive factor over Hailuo's faster API rate, but for narrative filmmakers, it genuinely is. That closes it out at Hailuo 3, Kling 2. Hailuo wins on output quality, sitting at number 1 on both VBench at 84.41 and LM Arena Elo at 1168. It's 2 to 3 times faster per clip for rapid iteration. Its free tier gives you 100 credits per day versus Kling's 66, and the subscription gets you more credits per dollar. Community consensus on character consistency and director's mode control lands firmly with Hailuo. Kling wins on API price at 0.12 per second versus Hailuo's 0.15, which is 20% cheaper for high-volume API users. It also wins on clip length at 10 seconds versus Hailuo's 6, which is the decisive advantage for narrative filmmakers who need a single clip to carry a full story beat without stitching. If you're making short, high-quality AI video and you want the fastest iteration loop, Hailuo is your pick. It wins 3 to 2, and it's the default for most creators. If you're a narrative filmmaker who needs 10-second clips, or you're running heavy API volume and the per-second rate matters, Kling is the right call. One thing that doesn't show up anywhere in the docs, Kling's multi-image subject reference, which sounds like a stronger consistency tool than Hailuo's single image reference, actually has a documented community failure rate for complex action sequences and multi-agent physics. So if your use case involves more than one character moving at the same time, that feature may not perform the way the marketing suggests. And if Kling is still in the running for you, I'd really check out the full breakdown I did on Runway Gen 5 versus Kling 3.0, because the clip length and API pricing story gets a lot more interesting when a third tool enters the picture, and that video has the numbers you need to make the final call.